And welcome on in, everybody, to the Check Your Brain podcast, hosted by me, Tony Mazur. Thank you for listening to this free version of the podcast, which goes out every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. It's also on YouTube and my Rumble account. But if you want more podcasts such as this one, go to my Patreon at patreon.com/Tony Mazur. You get sometimes 4, 5, maybe 6 podcasts a week. It's as low as $3 a month for audio only, $5 for audio and video, and $10 for extra podcasts. So go to patreon.com/Tony Mazur or go to Locals and find me at Check Your Brain there. My guest today is Aaron Peve. He is the co-host and producer of the B&W show, and get an opportunity to talk to him, and just we'll have some fun here. Aaron, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tony.
So the B&W show, what is it about? I've listened to a little bit of it, but tell listeners, get the plugs out, and we'll talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a social podcast. We talk about everything under the sun, but from a point of view of a white guy, myself, and my best friend, a black guy. We were obviously raised differently, different aspects as far as parents raise and such, and so which of course skews each other's points of views on current I don't want to say current headlines, but it could be headlines or hobbies, or we've talked comic books, we've talked guns, we've talked about music, movies, you name it. We talk about everything, and it's not to prove each other wrong. It's to find out, where our similarities lie, and we just have a fun, idle conversation.
Well, and that's what's interesting about doing a show where you have people with two vastly different points of view. And I remember when I started in radio, and I was doing internet radio back when I was 19, 20 years old. And my co-host, this guy named Don Peterson, he's a black dude from the hood, and I'm a white dude from the suburbs. So how does that make this work? And then we eventually added an Asian friend who was from upstate California, who went to Oberlin College, and you want to talk about the privilege of all privilege. How do we get together, all three of us from vastly different backgrounds, do a sports show? And it worked. That's what made it great, is that you kind of put things aside. You understand, obviously things have been very hypersensitive and kind of upfront in the past couple of years as far as social issues. But when you go back like 15 years ago, it was one of those cases where, okay, yeah, your background's this, my background's this, your background's this, but we all got together and we just talked about football. And it was great.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of stuff we do. Like I said, we talk comic books is one, a topic that we talk about a lot. My friend, he's never played Dungeons and Dragons, so I got a bunch of my friends together, and we all played Dungeons and Dragons. He had a ball. Like, it was the greatest thing he's ever done. Like, it's and then an opposite, like he took me I even think some event that I've never been to, and it's like we had fun, and it is not about well, you never experienced this. It's come experience this, and a lot of people that they get offended by the N word, right? But I think there's actually a worse term out there. The worst term you could actually say is my black friend, right? Because if he's your friend, why label it? Like, just he's your friend, or she's your friend.
It's always that qualification. It's like, no, exactly. see, no, I'm not like one of those people. See, I have a black friend.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure you do.
Right. It's like, what's the point of that? Like, is that the only reason he's your friend or she's your friend, is because you want that justification, like, and one of our topics we talk about musically, is like, well, I express, like, well, why does an Eminem get a pass? Why does he get to say the N word and all this stuff just because he hangs out with Snoop, Dre, and stuff? And my buddy's like, no, he doesn't do it. Like, listen to his music. So I went back to listen to his music. Doesn't ever use that term in any of his music. Like,
I haven't heard him use that. But like,
Yeah,
I think it was one of those cases. I think the reason you thought that is you felt that he had gotten enough of a pass to say that.
right, exactly. Yeah. But he didn't, and he didn't, do it as, he hangs out with Dre. He doesn't hang out with his black friend Dre. He hangs out with Dre. He hangs out with Snoop. That's that's his guys, not because or anything, just that's who he gets along with. And that's kind of what we do. Like, my co-host, he's not just my co-host, he's one of my best friends, and we hang out when we get the opportunity just because we like to hang out.
Well, and that's one of the things that kind of has popped up in the last couple of years is that you start to see this where like the hyper consciousness of we talk about race and social issues going on now is that you have people who are I guess and I'll say it right now because Malcolm X talked about it, is the white liberal has to go out of their way and say no, I'm not the racist guy, I'm not racist, see,
Right,
I have a black friend, I have
right,
many black friends, and you're just like, or maybe you just have friends. Like, does it
right,
really matter where their background is? And that's kind of
right,
how I've always operated. It didn't really matter to me what your background is. It's like if you have either a shared sense of values or like, because I know plenty of white people who look just like me, talk just like me. We don't share values, therefore we're not friends.
right.
It doesn't really matter the
Exactly,
skin color.
exactly. And it's, and it's about, to put it in, I guess justification terms, it's right or wrong. Like, if you're on the side of just and right, then you're on the side of just and right. If you're on the side of wrong and Karenicity, so to speak, then obviously it's where you stand. But
Mhm.
it has nothing to do with it. Just and that's just how we talk. We try not to get too caught up in the weeds emotionally. We banter and we have fun, and you know, our biggest job on the show, besides talk about whatever topic we're talking about, we talk about again all the time, is to make each other laugh. Like I do things to I try to like find that line that's going to make him laugh, and he does the same thing to me, just to and it fits within the conversation. That's part of what we do, is we make the conversation fun and engaging, um, so that way it's not all educational and like this is the way you should be. Like, no, man, just fucking chill, relax, just have fun. That's what the world's
Well,
about.
that's what makes it interesting is that because of this hyper focus that we've had in the last couple of years, it's like we're being told by the media that we need to focus because of the race. Like I started doing the show with my co-host years ago. It didn't matter. It's like I just wanted a show and he wanted a
Right,
show. It's like, well, how
right.
about we pair you guys up together? I didn't know this guy from Adam. And then
Yeah,
a couple of months later, you start to get to know them, their background, oh, you have a kid, or you were raised this way, you went to this high school. And it honestly shouldn't really matter. And I guess what has bothered me is somebody that, I've been doing stand-up comedy and like I'll do black rooms. I've DJ'd black clubs, and it never really, like, I didn't really think of the skin color of anybody. I thought of it as this is a fun time.
yeah,
We
yeah,
just have a good time. It's like
yeah.
I'll be DJing and and people will come up to me and say like, man, you're playing some great music. What are you drinking tonight? I'm like, the Long Island iced tea. It's like, here's a Long Island. I'm like, all right. So, and then I get a few of those. I'm like, okay, I can't drive home.
Right,
Out of my mind right now.
right. Yeah, yeah. That's what makes it fun. Like, if when you're doing what you love and you're surround yourself with people who are of similar mindset, then you don't need to worry. You don't the people that say like, oh, I don't see color. Well, why not? What's wrong with seeing color? Like, there people, it's not about not about color, because either people are jerks or people are worthwhile, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's that was another thing that's changed the last couple of years is I don't see color. I'm in a colorblind society. And now by saying that, you're out of touch.
Right,
You're completely out of touch. So if you say,
right,
I don't see color, it's like, yeah, you're lying.
right.
You're a
Exactly.
liar.
Yeah, yeah. You're fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself. And that's one of the things, like with comic books we're talking about, is the whole forced diversity right now that's going on through the pages is now there has to be a black Captain America, there has to be a girl
Mm.
Thor, because they can do it too, as opposed to making a great black superhero, which there's plenty,
Yeah.
or pushing great black superheroes, or making and great and pushing great, female or Latino or whatever superheroes that are out there, as opposed to trying to take Namor and make him Hispanic. Like, what's the point? Like,
Well, that was the recent one I came out this week when we're recording this. They said James Bond has got to be a black female. You say, well,
right,
then it's not James Bond.
right,
And the problem is that it's the qualification by saying that James Bond, because I'm not saying James Bond needs to be white. I'm saying
right,
James Bond is James Bond. He needs to be
right.
a dude who's, I don't care who he is. It's like, it could be Idris Elba, which there were many rumors about that. Doesn't matter to me. It's just, it takes away the fact that James Bond is now a female. James
Right.
Bond used to be a pussy hound. Let's be
Right.
honest here.
Right.
That's what it was in the
Exactly.
Sean Connery days. Roger Moore is a little weird, but George Lazenby, and you go through the whole list of them and you say, like, okay, so now we need Viola Davis is going to be James Bond. I'm like,
Yeah,
that's why Black
Viola
Panther was
Davis
so
is not-
successful, because it was more of an original character, and you're not
Yeah.
just taking an already taken concept and diversifying it, because then it seems like pandering to me.
Right, exactly. And that's what it's all about. Like, it's like society nowadays, it's all about pandering. It's pandering to make everybody feel good, and then like we all shouldn't be in the business of making each other feel good. You should be in the business of making yourself feel good. What feels good and right to you. Make a character that speaks to you. Make a story that speaks to you, and then it'll speak to the audience. Why push social values that don't matter?
Exactly. Well, and that's what's interesting about the last couple of years with Hollywood, is that things have really changed, and how, like, my wife and I were watching a movie the other night, and you hear certain words that were, I guess, more acceptable, like gay slurs that were in the 90s, that nowadays it's like even people who may even still use those words are like, whoa, they actually said that on TV. Did they really say that? And, things that, or like, my favorite example is this 2023, 15 years ago, 2008 is when Tropic Thunder came out.
Right.
And I know what you will say. I will say the same thing, and everybody else in this audience will say that and say, you can't make that movie nowadays.
Right.
But it was 15 years ago. Why can't we make that movie?
Right. Exactly. And that's what the social pariahs don't get about that movie, is even for that time, it, using quoting fingers, shouldn't have been made, because that was the point of it. Like,
Mhm.
the Robert Downey Jr. character playing a white dude, playing a black dude, or whatever. Like, that was the whole point. It was pushing the edge. It was, and the one black guy on the show was gay, and that was the whole point of the whole movie. And it was such a brilliant movie. I love
The
that
whole
movie.
movie of Tropic Thunder, which is why I think it's interesting how you haven't seen many comedies since then like that, was
Right.
it was a parody of Hollywood. So when people got upset because they said, oh, it's making fun of mentally handicapped people because he says full retard. And it's like, no, what he's saying is that some actors, and in the movie it's Ben Stiller, will go to will go way off the reservation of playing somebody that is so almost stereotypical that they will go to that level to try to win an Oscar. So he's like, he mentioned Sean Penn, Rosie O'Donnell, he says Forrest Gump, but he's like, but no, they only did, he's like, Dustin Hoffman, you were, it's autistic, but not retarded. It's like, you went full retard. And but then at the same time, you have somebody who's a method actor. So what Robert Downey Jr. is doing is he's doing a parody of Daniel Day-Lewis, who will go to the extent of, I'll make myself a different race if I need to, just so I can get this part. And that you can only refer to me as the part in the movie. And that it was a parody, but I think the problem nowadays is we've completely, as a society, have lost nuance. I think we've lost satire. I think, and I think that's one of the problems, that you can't do good, like true, good, biting comedy anymore.
Yeah. That I was just, my wife and I were just sitting there watching a Netflix movie, Vince Vaughn and, and I'm just sitting there just kind of watching going, who is this generation's Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler,
Pete Davidson?
Like, well, maybe
that's about it.
Like, yeah, that's about it. And what has he done? Like, not much. Like who's those cutting edge, pushing, screwball comedy? Like, there's no screwball actors anymore. Like once those guys are gone, like there's nothing.
Todd Phillips is the one who did, I think he did the Hangover movies, and he did a bunch of that, and he's the one who did the Joker. And he said, I can't make a movie like the Hangover anymore, because you just know that you put it out there, audiences are going to pick it in front of Regal Cinemas or a Cinemark somewhere, and they're going to be offended. And it's like, I'm just going to do a movie that's so absurd, and it wins Oscars. So, I think he did all right with that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But it's I find that interesting nowadays, is that I think what's happened is people are very afraid of course, what we call cancel culture. And I think what's interesting about cancel culture is some people will say, well, it's not cancel culture, it's accountability culture, that you can't just go up there and just drop N-bombs and think that you're going to keep your job. It's like, I think people realize that. I think people know that you're not going to be Michael Richards at the Laugh Factory. That's not going to work out too well. Like, if Michael Richards did that now as opposed to 2006, Seinfeld would not be on TV anymore.
Right.
But I think there's also a difference when we talk about cancel culture of that it is still around, where if you do something that's, I guess, you hit on a taboo, or you kind of touch some nerve, that you could get some kind of blowback. But I guess it depends on the personality. If you're a stand-up comic and you go on stage, you're one of those guys who just offends anyone. You're like, I don't care who you are, I'm just going to go up there and just offend you. And then we get off stage and we have a drink. And I think those have started to got few and far between, because when I started doing comedy, 9 years ago, it was a slightly different, like pre-Trump society, where it was like, there was a little bit more nuance to it. And now it's like, nope, we are offended. And how dare you say that stuff? Like, I've had that a couple of times. It was classic. I did a set one time, and I got off stage, and these two girls came up to me and they said, we take issue with two of your jokes. And I'm like, really? What jokes were they? They're like, you said this, and this was really offensive to women. And I said, actually, no, the point of the joke was, it was a referendum on me being stupid. They're like, okay, well, what about this joke where you were really offensive to women? I'm like, again, that was a self-deprecating joke about how I am not the best boyfriend or husband or whatever. I don't remember the material. And then 5 minutes later, I just so happened to be in the bar area, and the women's room door opened, and both of them are on their knees snorting cocaine off a toilet seat. On a Tuesday night in suburbia. I'm like, wow. All right, sure. I'm going to be lectured by a couple of cokeheads on a Tuesday.
That sounds about right. Lord, jeez.
It's crazy. So on the B&W show, your podcast that you guys have, like, any other like recent topics that you guys have really gotten into that either, I don't know if you didn't see eye to eye, or was there anything that you guys got into where it was just like, this is kind of a lightning rod, like, we got to definitely bring this up?
Nothing too much of lately. I mean, thankfully him and I are, we've made the stance to make sure the B&W show doesn't become Jerry Springer, right? Like,
yeah. What's your co-host's name, by the way?
His name is Lavelle Claiborne. Or
I just want to get that out there for people listening.
Yeah. I call him Vel for short. So me and Vel, we try our best not to make it Jerry Springer or
rest in peace.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. We had a topic that I wanted to bring up that he didn't feel comfortable with, and we had the conversation before the show, and that axe that subject. We're like, all right, it's out. If you're not comfortable with it, we're out. It's got to be something that we can talk about, and maybe it'll come up again, and maybe it won't. I wanted to have him essentially, or bring somebody on to essentially like teach me jive, like it's like street talk. But I kept calling it.
Just watch Airplane.
Yeah, exactly.
Stewardess, I speak jive.
I kept referring it to a different terminology, and he's like, I don't like that phrasing. I'm like, all right, that's cool. Yeah, we'll come back around to it. But there hasn't been anything, whether it's Black Lives Matter or any of that kind of stuff, because our first topic was from a few years ago, the big topic, which was the Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the national anthem, right? That's kind of what kind of threw the show into existence. Is during that time I was in his wedding party, and I was the thin cream and the double stuffed Oreo, so to speak.
Yes.
And he had me in his wedding party, and we go over to his house to do some rehearsal stuff and whatever, and it was me with his guys, who are guys he's known forever, and me just kind of meeting these guys. And so there's conversation at that time that like I had my point of view because of how I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to listen to their side of that coin, just like listening to their conversation without butting in. I just listened to their conversation, and I was like, that's the show, right? Just listening to conversation.
Yep.
So that was the big topic, and ever since it's always been like, let's make sure, again, it's not lightning rod or Jerry Springer.
I thought the Colin Kaepernick thing was an absolute failure of people in all of our forms of entertainment, whether it was media, podcasting, anything, because I thought it was a great example of the time. You're talking about summer into fall 2016, before a lot of the craziness that's been happening the last couple of years. And I think there could have been a lesson that we learned and we didn't. And my take on the whole Kaepernick thing is that flag that's in the middle of the field that they're pull out every game, no matter what, and everybody genuflex or whatever, whatever the case. If Colin Kaepernick wants to kneel in front of that flag represents his opportunity to kneel in front of it. If he wants to kneel, if he wants to sit, if he wants to lay face down, if he wants to spit on it, if he wants to wipe his ass with it, I think he has every opportunity to do that, because that flag, that's what it represents.
Exactly.
However, I think the audience has every right to tell him to fuck off.
Right, absolutely.
Because that's their free market. That's their advice. And the problem is it became such a weird lightning rod of where do we go with free speech? And I think the free speech is we all have that ability to do that. Instead, we decided to go into petty fights with each other instead of going, look, if he wants to do that, that's fine. If you want to have a boycott and walk out because guys are kneeling, that's fine. It's like, that's what it should be. Instead, it turned into a race war. I'm like, this is not what it should be. Like, again, I'm sympathetic towards veterans who did feel very, strongly about it, but I also am a free speech absolutist. And part of that flag, he's not burning the flag. He's not like when Rick Monday pulled the flag out at Wrigley Field in the 70s. He's there. He's like, I feel a certain way about America and police brutality and everything that's been going on. But the audience in the crowd has every right to tell him to screw off. And it was one of those cases that I thought we could learn a better lesson, and we didn't. And it's just gotten worse since then.
Right. Yeah. And my take on that whole situation was, so people talking about, with him kneeling and stuff, and they're offended by that. I was like, well, what about the other code violations that are going on during the national anthem. People are like, what are you talking about? Well, when the national anthem is being played, everybody is supposed to stop, stand still, right? The only thing that should be moving is the flag. And that not that people sitting there doing this, because then people aren't moving during the national anthem. It's not the cameraman doing this and panning. He's supposed to be standing still. There's actually flag etiquette. So if they're mad about him kneeling, they should be mad about the people flapping the flag and the cameraman panning through all the athletes and all the vendors walking around still selling their popcorn. That should not be happening either. So that, you talk about that flag code violation. But a question that also came up from my nephew, stemming from Kaepernick and the whole Black Lives Matter, he's like, well, Black Lives Matter and all lives matter, right? I'm like, yeah, exactly. Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. So then why should we be celebrating Black Lives Matter if all lives matter? I'm like, okay, put up your 5 fingers. He's like, okay. He's like, now this one represents Black Lives Matters. He's like, okay. And I went like this. Now put up all 5. Now put up all lives matter. He's like, I can't. You're holding my 1 finger down. I'm like, exactly.
I mean, it's like we learn the wrong lessons as society. And that's why we get into topics where people either, they get heated, they get canceled off of podcasts and it's gotten to the point where people have just run to their echo chambers. So you'll have the all lives matter people on one end and the Black Lives Matter people on all, and they're like, they don't want to hear dissent. Right. And that's why it's good to have podcasts where you have differing points of view, where you have people who go up there and they'll talk about certain things and go, okay, here's my perspective. Here's your perspective. Where can we find some common ground? If we don't find common ground, then we agree to disagree. It's one of those cases. That's what it was 10 years ago. Right. How did we get to a point where it's now, no, your opinion is wrong. Your opinion is evil. It's racist. It's this and that. And my opinion is like, what? It's like, my opinion is accepted by our, no, who's accepting an opinion? Who's to say your opinion is better than others? It's an opinion.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was such a lightning rod topic that you notice that it went away pretty quick, because it was when 2017, when the NFL was showing that, because they said CBS and Fox and ESPN, who was showing the games, are like, show the field, show the kneelers, look, there's Colin Kaepernick, he's kneeling, show this guy, he's kneeling, and everybody. And then it got your, VFW halls are like, put bowling on. I don't want to watch this anymore. And there was the ratings. You would have thought the NFL, no one's going to stop the NFL. Ever since the USFL days where they were trying to chip in back in the 80s, no one was touching the NFL. And until 2017, you started seeing the ratings go down. By 2018, they stopped showing any of that.
Right.
It's so weird. How did we resolve the kneeling in the NFL? All they resolved was, we're just not going to show it anymore. I mean, guys are still kneeling, but no one has to know, right?
Exactly.
So we learned no lesson. Typical of America, right?
Under the rugs, and don't worry about that lump under the rug. It's not for you to worry about.
Oh, that's a broken arm you have? Well, here's a bandage.
It hurts when I do this. Well, then don't do that. All right.
Yeah, the whole thing that in the past couple of years that we've gone through this process of a lot of these social issues that have really popped up, because, and like I talk about on my podcast, is we can talk politics all we want, the 2020 election, 2022, 2024, doesn't really matter. What matters now is everything has become cultural. Everything is a culture war. Every single thing. And Andrew Breitbart had the classic quote of politics being downstream from culture. And everything you notice nowadays that's making waves in politics is a cultural battle from several months ago that just sifted down. And now we're all fighting about trans issues or Black Lives Matter, this and this and this and this. And you go, what happened to, I guess, politics and culture is just, it's blended right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, they say America's in such a bad spot. Like, if we're such a bad spot, how come it's social issues we're talking about and not war, poverty, and overspending? I mean, we could be Venezuela, but here we are talking about trans issues. So I think we're doing all right.
Well, yeah, it's one of those cases where it's like, hey, you see this right here? We're really doing this over here, but look at this. Look at what we're doing over here. We're going to
Right.
distract you with this issue while we do this. And we're like, hey, by the way, there's a war that's still going on in Ukraine right now that we haven't really talked about in months.
Yeah.
Hey, there's a rumor that Ukraine was trying to attack the Kremlin as early as today when we're recording this. But by the way, look at this. Look over here. Look at the shining ball.
Yeah. Look at this bathroom. It's for everybody. Oh no.
It's everybody. It doesn't matter. Are you a female, a she-male, whatever it is? Go to our bathroom. By the way, we're never mind the fact that all our banks are collapsing at the exact same time. Don't think about that.
Oh, and your tax. No, don't worry. But don't worry about the bank because your taxpayer money is going to go help fund them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't worry about that. That's what's so funny about all these issues. And it's like I said, it's good to have podcasts. It's good to have, because if here's the other thing that I'm sure you've probably realized over time why you're doing a podcast is our traditional media outlets have failed us so much that whether it's Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, whether it's your local newspaper, the national newspaper, your local news, the national news, that it's kind of hard to get a soundbite in a couple of minutes. And then you got to go to a commercial where we're pimping, more pharmaceutical drugs in a commercial break, whatever the case is, that it's good to have podcasts. And that's why as many people rip on Joe Rogan, I don't listen to all of Joe Rogan's podcast. I've heard some of them. It's fine. I like some of his guests. Others, I'm like, yeah, I'll skip that. But it's the fact that you're giving a platform to different ideas. And that's what podcasting is nowadays. It's the opportunity where people you may not agree with. Like there are times where I've heard people, I'm like, I'm not a big fan of this guy, a politician, pop culture figure. And then I hear them in a 2-hour podcast and I start to come around because I'm like, oh, wait, they're much deeper than I thought they were. But then there's other celebrities. I'm like, oh, yeah, they're exactly who I thought they were. Why did I waste my time? But that's what's great about this medium that's ever changing now is that we do have an opportunity that if you have somebody that has some ideas that may not be able to get them out in a previous way, then you have an hour, you have your own podcast, you can start your own podcast, you go on somebody else's, and you have plenty of time to get those ideals out as opposed to quick sound bites like we used to in the traditional media days.
Right. Exactly. For those who don't agree with that, if your local newspaper or TV channel or whoever you follow is supporting a candidate, that means they're biased. They're not reporting the news for you. They're reporting the news for their platform. Just FYI.
It's propaganda. I mean, that's what it's come down to is that media outlets are propaganda wings. And I know that in sports, by the way. So in a less serious topic, sports is a great example. And I'm going to tell people this. I'm going to break the fourth wall right now. So you have let's say, for example, a baseball team, because it's baseball season right now. We're recording this. And a baseball team, they get they play a game. And afterward, you go into the clubhouse as a media scrum. And I've been in plenty of locker rooms in my time of working in radio. And usually the first couple of questions are called by the team reporter. So in the last 20-something years, teams, whether it's any professional team, if you're a fan of the Dodgers, if you're an LA Dodgers fan, the LA Dodgers have an LADodgers.com reporter that's down there in the locker room who asks the question. Well, who does he get paid by? He gets paid by the Los Angeles Dodgers. So you're not going to get the hard-hitting questions. So if the Dodgers, for example, tonight lose 15-1, but that one run was a home run by Mookie Betts, the Dodger reporter, who's going to be called on first in that press conference, he's going to ask the manager the question, Dave Roberts, and say, talk about that one home run that Mookie Betts hit, as opposed to the 15 runs the rest of the team got. So you understand that a lot of these media outlets end up being just PR firms for government. If it's in like political stuff, if it's in sports, you're definitely you are serving the team.
Right.
And you go, what happened to regular journalism? Is it
Yep.
completely gone?
It has been bought and sold. Bought and sold.
There's no objectivity.
Yeah.
And like at one time you had the point counterpoint, you had like shows on CNN like Crossfire or something where you had an opportunity where it was a little bit of a differing opinion. And instead it's like, no, what is the agreed upon opinion? And I thought that was a real problem during the COVID stuff. And I'm not
Right.
saying that, like people have had their opinions on whether it was masks and vaccines or Fauci or however it was handled. It was weird that there was never an opportunity for like a debate during COVID. It just seemed like, here is the opinion because we're the experts. Now, the experts were right on a couple of things. They were wrong on many things. But why was it one agreed upon opinion as opposed to, wait a second here, I thought the point of science is that we have an opportunity for a couple of control groups, and you have a control group here, and you have a control group here, and you see which one through the scientific method, through your hypothesis, is going to work. And instead we decided as society in the last several years to go, nah, don't need you.
Right. We're just following the science, not necessarily the scientific method, just the science that's being presented.
Yeah. And who is it propped up by? Big business.
Exactly.
Is big pharma. That's why do you think, anything during COVID that was going on, any news station, you're like, why isn't the news talking about this? Because when they go to commercial break, they're brought to you by Pfizer.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same way, like when you talk about the war effort, why aren't more people talking about what the atrocities happening in war? It's because their commercial break is brought to you by Lockheed Martin and BlackRock and all these other, and Vanguard and all. I mean, it's kind of and that's what's interesting about this whole topic, whether it doesn't have to be about race or about sex and gender and transgender. We should understand that there are people, it's like, we should all be together on one side by saying we may disagree on certain things, but understand that there are powers that be who are purposely trying to divide us.
Yeah, exactly. Like it, we should be organized as a people.
True.
As opposed to letting the government organize us.
Yeah, instead of like, oh, I guess this is how we're supposed to think. It's like, no, think for yourself.
Yeah.
Think for yourself, even if it's not the approved opinion. It doesn't have to be about like whether the COVID stuff or social issues or just anything. It doesn't have to be the approved opinion. Every so often, sometimes your opinion, if you think for yourself, you're presented with this. And that's why your podcast is great, because you have those different perspectives where sometimes you have a perspective and then your co-host has a different perspective, and you kind of put things together and you go, I still kind of like on my side here.
Yeah.
It's like, I've been presented with your evidence. I present you with my evidence. And you go, I've thought it out. We've talked it out. And I'm like, you know what? I'm still going to be team me here. It's okay. But then other times you can change your opinion. You're like, I didn't think of it that way.
Exactly.
That's what we're supposed to do. And it's like, we're almost told we're not to do that.
Yeah. It's bad. It's bad to disagree. It's bad to be wrong.
Isn't it incredible? Like, how do we fix this? Other than obviously what we're doing, but it just seems like I don't want to say it's a futile effort, but goodness, we're trying all we could.
I say rule number 1, don't care about what other people think. Rule number 2, make yourself happy.
Yeah. That's what it comes down to.
Or even switch them. Rule number 1, make yourself happy. Rule number 2, don't care what other people think. Either way, it works.
And sometimes they go both one and the same.
Right.
Exactly. Like you get off on the fact that no, you don't make everyone happy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's goodness. But I mean, we're in interesting times. I'm like it's weird because here's the other thing is when it comes to the political stuff and social media, because of what's been happening with TikTok and in an ideal world, would you want to see TikTok banned? I'm like, No, and I
Yeah.
also don't think it should be banned because, again, as a free speech guy, I don't want it to be banned, even if I find a lot of stuff on there repugnant.
Right.
But you know, how things have changed with social media is that now you have mobs that go after people that try to cancel people, and you go, boy, we're entering different territory. This is like way different from the letter to the editor in the newspaper, but I
Yeah.
read your column and I disagreed with it. So you're like, okay, and how many people read that? They're like, oh, it's just some asshole who just posted in the newspaper the letter to the, who cares? Or you have the like the editorial at the end of a newscast where you have the news director like, here's my counterpoint with this. You're like, okay, well, I'm gonna change it. Let's see. Oh, Sports Center's on. That's fine. It's new territory with social media here.
It's so different, man. There's it's a I don't want to put it like this way, but like I never understood why with social media the people like the gay couple who are protesting a bakery because they won't make their cake for their wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And you put it on, that's great, put it on social media, make sure blast them. But why then are you trying to force them to make your cake?
Yeah.
It's like sending your food back in a restaurant because you're gonna get it back with spit in it. Like, like use social media for the platform of, hey, hey, if you're gay, don't go here. But I found this other bakery that's great, go here and start pushing that business.
It turns
it's,
into extortion. That was what my big problem is if you're a gay couple and they say, we will not bake a cake for you because of our religious principles. I look at it as the same thing as when me and my wife got married. And if we went to a bakery and it was a black owned place, let's just, for example, and they said, we don't make cakes for white people, be like, well, that sucks. You're not getting our business. Then we'll go elsewhere. I don't want to boycott. It's like, that's your choice. You're a business owner. You say, I don't want to make cakes for white people. Okay, then I'll go to a place that does. That's the free market. That's capitalism. But it turned into, no, we need to bring you to the Supreme Court because you're not baking a cake because you're infringing on our civil rights. And you're like, ooh, really? We're going to go there now? Because that's new territory, and that's in the last 10 years now, and I don't like this precedent.
I mean, I don't like the precedence of using religion to push back on homosexual relationship. That's not my place to say either way, but like why would you then want to give them your business? I never got that. I don't understand.
Well, it turned into a cottage industry, I think. In the last 10 years, we've created a cottage industry of that I'm offended by something, and instead of just being offended and going home and like telling your spouse about like, can you believe what happened to me today? It turned into, can you believe what happened to me today? I want the world to know about it. I want the world to boycott and everything. And then that turned into like an industry of people canceling people for tweets they posted in 2010. It's like, hey, so-and-so is got on SNL, or so-and-so is hosting the Oscars. And they're like, in 2009, you said this on Twitter. And I'm like, yeah, there was a difference. It doesn't matter a society. It kind of does, because we have really decided in the last couple of years that we need everything before 2010 was racist and sexist or offensive and Me Too, this and that. You say, well, I mean, I can't really. We're like it's basically like everything before 1995. So we mentioned Tropic Thunder, but you can't play Blazing Saddles anymore.
No,
that's out the window. And the whole thing, again, for just like with Blazing Saddles, it was the same thing. It wasn't a movie that was trying to be racist. It was a movie that was lampooning the racially tinged Westerns that were popular at the time that Mel Brooks would watch, and said that these guys probably just dropped N-bombs all the time. Well, what if we did a movie, again, during the nuanced times of what if we did a movie where we had Slim Pickens dropping N-bombs because it kind of, and it's weird to say that it was in context, but then you talk to somebody who's like a Zoomer now and they're like, it doesn't matter the context. Okay, well, it kind of does, but sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was still, at that time, there was controversy around the film. I'm a big Mel Brooks fan. So at the time, he actually wanted Richard Pryor to play Sheriff Bart, but at that time, Richard Pryor was having issues.
They couldn't insure him. They couldn't insure him with the studio because he was too drunk and high all the time.
Yeah, he was having his personal demons he was battling. So they turned down the possibility of Pryor. So Mel Brooks then instead gave Richard Pryor a writer's credit on the film to make sure he was still tagged as part of that film.
And Cleavon Little ends up getting the role, which I believe he got because he was playing him and Damon Wilson, I think, played burglars on All in the Family.
Yeah.
And I think that's how he ended up getting the role because of that. But I mean, that's, again, when you throw nuance, and the problem is it hurts comedy, it hurts entertainment when you have to run things through. I was just talking to a comic just before we did this podcast. I was doing another podcast. And when you start running it through the ringer of, okay, this might offend this group or this person and this individual and this, and this, and you go, okay, now what I've done is I've stripped my potential for comedy here. Because comedy, you're going to offend somebody. Let's be honest here. You're going to offend somebody. Who's it going to be? But it's also how you do it. If you're just going up there and you're just being blatantly racist or sexist, then the audience is going to tell you that you're being blatantly racist and sexist. But if you do so in a way where it's like, okay, yeah, I get it, I'm being ribbed, but it's kind of funny, then there you go. That's what it's all about.
It's all about timing.
Well, yeah, timing and that's what's great about comedy. That's why it's a great art form. Is it's about the material, it's about the timing, and it's about the presentation. How do you present it? How are you doing so? Like I said, are you Michael Richards at the Laugh Factory, or are you somebody who can actually make a really good routine and build something around? So it's all dependent. It's very interesting.
Right, for sure.
So what's this background that I see? So you're directing. It looks like you're directing something.
Actually, let me get out of the way a little bit. So that's my buddy here. So I actually wrote a kid's book of all things, talking about social injustice and stuff. So yeah. So this is actually my buddy Butch. He's a rhino. I get to hang out with him like every other Saturday. I wrote a kid's book called The Rhino That Dreams. It actually stars Butch the Rhino. I did there you go. So
there it is. It came out this year.
Yeah, that's the one. So it's on Amazon. Great $13. All the artwork in it is AI. So the artwork is actually really pretty decent. I don't know what that other book is, but the artwork in it is actually really decent. Those are probably pretty good too. I don't know who they are, but support. And so when it's the real time, the story of Butch, it's a very cartoonish as such. But then when it goes into his dream sequence, it's actually more impressionistic painting. So you can see on the back, that's the back cover there. That's a picture of me and Butch at the upper left-hand corner. I'm about 6'4", heavy 280, and you can see Butch is a good 5.5 tons. He actually takes up the whole length of that fencing back there. So it shows you how big that rhino is. Yeah, he's a cool dude. Like I said, I get to hang out with him. I've actually give him hugs and give him belly rubs and arm wrestle with this horn, which he easily flings me off. And then give him treats and all sorts of stuff. He's just a cool dude.
Excellent. Well, I know a lot of my listeners have kids, so go check this out. Yeah, just $13 paperback. The Rhino That Dreams, go on Amazon by Aaron J. Peve. And of course, the B&W podcast that you're a part of. And it's been a fun conversation here.
Same. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Where can we find you on social media? Any other plugs you want to get out there?
The biggest one, just check out B&W Show on Facebook. I don't really have a whole lot of social media stuff. That's the big one. YouTube, B&W Show. We might be on Spotify. I think we're pushing Spotify to get on there. But those are the two big ones right now, Facebook and YouTube.
That sounds great. Well, Aaron, thanks for doing this. Thanks for doing the podcast here, and we'll keep in touch definitely. And yeah, no, it was a good time. And if you enjoyed what you heard, by the way, yeah, B&W Podcast, and go to Amazon, go purchase his book. And if you liked me, for people who want to hear me on my podcast, go to patreon.com/Tony Mazur for 4 to 5 podcasts per week, as little as $3 a month. And if you liked what you heard, but you don't want to pay me, that's okay. Every Wednesday, this podcast goes out for free. Go check it out. Subscribe to the Check Your Brain podcast, just in case you stumbled upon me. And yeah, I appreciate the listeners. And Aaron, thanks again for doing the show. And everybody, thanks for listening. And I will talk to you with more free content for you coming up next Wednesday. Unless you go on Patreon, I'll be back with you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Take care now.